Stop. Before you spend 40,000 pounds on your next family SUV, there's something you need to see. This car right here could completely change everything you thought you knew about premium SUVs. And what Audi's done with the gear shifter and indicators? Well, let's just say Tesla tried something similar and failed miserably. But Audi might have actually cracked the code. Stick around because in the next 10 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why this vehicle could be the smartest money you'll spend this year, or potentially your biggest regret. So here's what nobody's talking about. While everyone's obsessing over electric vehicles, completely convinced that petrol and diesel are dead, Audi just dropped this bombshell, the all-new third-generation Q3. And before you roll your eyes thinking it's just another facelift, hold on, because this thing has been around for over a decade now, 2 full generations, and it's become one of Audi's absolute best sellers. Now think about that for a second. If it was selling that well, why would they risk changing it? What did they know that made them confident enough to completely redesign one of their cash cows? Here's the reality that most car reviewers won't tell you straight. Audi could have easily killed this car off. They could have said, right, everything's going electric, the Q2 is already on its way out, let's just replace the whole lineup with battery-powered alternatives. But they didn't. And that decision alone should tell you something massive about where the market actually is right now, not where the headlines say it should be. Now, if you're not familiar with Audi's numbering system, it's actually pretty straightforward. The Q3 sits right in the middle. It's bigger than the Q2, smaller than the Q5. Simple enough. But here's where it gets interesting. The Q2 is about to disappear completely from showrooms. When it comes back, it'll be fully electric. But that's not happening anytime soon, which means this Q3 is about to become Audi's cheapest SUV. And that matters more than you might think, because it changes the entire value equation. Let's talk about what you're actually looking at. Audi claims they've gone with a new design language. Smoother surfaces, cleaner lines, all that marketing speak. The front end looks pretty similar to the new Q5, which makes sense because they want that family resemblance. There's a redesigned rear with new lights and this black plastic section that honestly looks like something straight out of a video game. You get 18, 19, or 20-inch alloys depending on which trim level you choose, 9 paint colors available in the UK market, including a new green and a couple of new grays. Standard stuff so far, right? But wait, let's open up the boot because this is where things start getting complicated and where most reviews completely miss the point. The old Q3 had 530 liters of space below the parcel shelf. This new one, only 488 liters. Your first reaction is probably, hang on. That's worse. The new car has less space than the old one. What kind of progress is that? Here's what they're not telling you in the headlines. In the old Q3, if you went for the upgraded sound system, and apparently 90% of customers did exactly that, the boot capacity dropped to 488 liters anyway, because of the extra speaker placement. And this new Q3, it gets that upgraded sound system as standard. So effectively, for most people, the boot space is exactly the same. It's not worse. It's just standardized. But there's a catch. And this is crucial if you're considering the plug-in hybrid. That version only gives you 375 liters. That's a significant drop. Open up the boot floor and you'll see why. The battery takes up a massive amount of space. Now, if you go for one of the non-hybrid versions, you get proper underfloor storage and a height-adjustable boot floor as standard. 2 very different experiences depending on which powertrain you choose. Let me give you some real numbers because storage space means nothing until you actually try to fit stuff in there. In the old Q3 plug-in hybrid, we could fit 6 carry-on suitcases below the parcel shelf. In a non-hybrid, 7 suitcases. For comparison, a VW Tiguan can swallow 9 suitcases. That Tiguan is basically the benchmark for massive boots in this segment. So the Q3 isn't too far behind, but it's not leading the pack either. What is good though, access. The boot opening is tall and wide, there's barely any loading lip, the parcel shelf is big, but you can tuck it away relatively easily at the front of the boot if you need the extra height. And the rear seats? They split fold 40-20-24 as standard. That means each seat can fold independently. Pull the lever from the side, and they drop down pretty much flat with the boot floor. For a family SUV, these are the practical details that actually matter when you're loading shopping or luggage or sports equipment week after week. Now here's something you might have noticed. This doesn't look like a typical SUV from the back. That's because this particular model is the Q3 Sportback, basically a coupe-styled version with a much more aggressively sloping roofline. You could get this with the old Q3, and the option continues with this generation. Boot capacity below the parcel shelf is the same as the regular SUV. But above the parcel shelf, that's where you lose space because of that sloping roof cutting into the available height. And this brings me to something really important. The new Q3 is 40 millimeters longer than the old car. Sounds good on paper. But most of that extra length is at the front purely to make the bonnet look longer and more proportional. The wheelbase, the distance between the front and rear wheels, is identical to the old car, which means interior space hasn't actually grown at all. This new Q3 has exactly the same passenger room as the old one. Sitting in the back seats, rear legroom is genuinely very good. I'm 177 centimeters tall, about 5'10", sitting behind my own driving position, and there's loads of room for my legs. Decent foot space too, although there's a bit of a ledge under the front seats, so you can't slide your feet all the way through. But remember, we're in the Sportback version right now, and this is not where this car shines for practicality. Because sitting up straight with my head against the headrest, my head is touching the roof lining. I can sit here normally and be reasonably comfortable, but if I was any taller, this would be a problem. In the regular SUV version, there's significantly more headroom. So if you're planning to regularly carry tall adults in the back, absolutely do not buy the Sportback. Go for the SUV instead. You're paying more for less practicality, which makes no sense, unless you really value that coupe styling. But what you do get back here, though, is pretty well equipped. 2 USB-C ports as standard, your own climate controls with easy temperature adjustment, but the center console comes pretty far back into the footwell, and there's a large transmission tunnel. If someone's sitting in the middle seat, they'll need to squeeze their legs either side of it. Not ideal for 3 adults. When the middle seat isn't occupied, you can fold it down to reveal an armrest and 2 cup holders. You can also fold down the middle seat itself to get easy access through to the boot, which is actually really handy on long trips. The window line is fairly low, so you need to duck down a bit to get the best view out, but there's still decent light coming in. It doesn't feel cramped, even in the Sportback. Overall, even the regular SUV version of the Q3 isn't quite as spacious in the rear as an X1 or XC40. It's still pretty good, but it's not class-leading for space. The Sportback obviously makes that worse with less headroom, but here's where this car absolutely destroys its rivals. Sliding rear seats as standard. You can slide the middle seat and the outer seats forward and back. You can also adjust the angle of the backrest. Move it far forward if you want, although I can't think of anyone who would want to sit like that, or put it all the way back for maximum comfort. This is brilliant, not just for passenger comfort, but for flexibility. Move the seats forward and you increase boot space. Move them back and you maximize legroom. That flexibility is something the X1 and XC40 simply don't offer as standard. Now, let's move to the front because this is where things get really interesting and controversial. The main change everyone's talking about is right here. The gear selector used to be on the center console. Now it's moved up here onto the steering column, and it's attached to the indicators and windshield wipers on the same stock. Normally these would be separate, one on each side, but Audi's combined everything into one unit. Now before you panic, before you assume this is going to be a complete disaster, let me tell you what it's actually like after driving this car for a while. It's not an ergonomic disaster. We've seen Tesla mess around with indicator placement, moving them onto the steering wheel itself, and that's genuinely terrible. But what Audi's done here, it's actually functional. Everything is still within easy reach. The wipers are on a fairly small dial, which is a bit fiddly compared to a separate big stock. But once you know where everything is and get used to the layout, it works fine. It's different, but it's not worse. The steering wheel itself is new too. It features touch-sensitive panels. But it's not purely touch-sensitive, which is important. With some controls, you have options. The volume, for example, you can slide up or down, or you can press up or down. As touch-sensitive setups go, this is definitely not the worst out there, but let's be honest, it would still be better to have completely separate physical buttons for everything. Touch controls on a steering wheel will never be as good as proper buttons. They're just not. You get an 11.9-inch fully digital driver display. It's been designed so the steering wheel hopefully won't block important information, with the main bulk of data presented widescreen below the top of the rim. There's loads of configurability with different layouts and information options, but the graphics aren't the sharpest around. They're functional, but they're not going to wow you. Same story with the 12.8-inch touchscreen infotainment system. It's responsive, fairly simple layout. Audi generally does good infotainment systems. But the graphics, again, aren't amazing. And here's the frustrating part. You've got all this space down here on the center console, where you could have physical buttons and dials for the climate controls. But no, everything's on the touchscreen. Now, to be fair, at least the climate controls are permanently visible on screen. And you've got this big ledge where you can rest your hand while adjusting settings as you drive. But it's still not as good as having separate physical controls. The old Q3 had proper dials and buttons for climate control. This is a step backwards. Older Audis used to have a rotary dial to help control the infotainment system. Even the old Q3 had ditched that by the end, so obviously there's no rotary dial here either. And honestly, I miss those. They were intuitive and easy to use while driving. Now, we're in a range-topping version of the Q3 here. This is as fancy and expensive looking as it gets in this car. And the quality is pretty good. Not mind-blowing, but decent. The materials look and feel relatively expensive. The dashboard isn't some luxurious soft-touch surface, but it still looks fairly classy. There are harder plastics around in places. So it's not a premium interior from top to bottom. But compared to the BMW X1 and Volvo XC40, this still holds up well. But here's the uncomfortable truth. This is another example of Audi not focusing on interiors the way they used to. The new Q5, for instance, has a good interior compared to modern rivals, but it's